Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over my top 10 historical fiction with some bonus material. I'm going to be talking about some 5-star predictions within historical fiction as well. I was inspired by Amanda from The Curly Reader. I'll link her video down below, but she talked about her top 10 historical fiction, and in honor of Historathon, which is a historical fiction readathon that we are hosting in the month of November, it feels like the perfect time for a video like this. So I'm going to go over my top 10 favorite books with a little bit of a twist. I actually do have a top 6 that I feel confident about because they were recent reads, and then I have 4 books that I feel like I need to reread, and that might be a project for me for next year in order for me to determine if they truly are historical fiction favorites, because I think it's just been too long of a time since I originally read them for me to actually know whether they hold up or not. And also at the end, just a bit of a bonus of some historical fiction reads that I think have 5-star potential and to become favorites. So that's what's in store today. So let me mention my top 6. I don't think I can rank them in favorite order within the top 6, but I'm going to start with my absolute favorite fiction read of last year, and now this author is a favorite author of mine, and that is Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. This is the first book of hers that I read that I loved. It is jam-packed with adventure, but also deals with a lot of heavy topics and a little bit of romance. This is about a family that decides to go west on the Oregon Trail, and it really depicts some of the turmoil that these pioneers encountered. And this was a page-turner, non-stop, couldn't put it down kind of book for me. Since reading this last year, I've now also read 2 other Amy Harmons, What the Wind Knows and The Unknown Beloved. Both of these I've read this year. This one I read in a historical fiction reading vlog. Overall, all 3 books I gave 5 stars, but Where the Lost Wander is still a favorite out of the 3, and so easily Amy Harmon is a favorite author, and I feel like whatever she comes out with next, I'm gonna keep an eye on and probably try to read. She does have quite an extensive backlist, and I know that some of her backlist includes other genres like fantasy, so I have that at my disposal as well. And because we're talking about Amy Harmon, I guess I'll throw in that a book that I think has the potential to get another 5-star for me is From Sand and Ash. This is her World War II historical fiction set in Italy, and I just feel like I'm gonna love it because I already loved all 3 of her other historical fictions. Since Where the Lost Wander was a book I read last year, another one that I read last year and made its way onto my top lists is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce. This is a sweet and lovely and wholesome World War II historical fiction set during the London Blitz. Follows a young woman who wants to be a wartime correspondent, but she ends up working for an advice column at the newspaper, and there's really good friendship in here, a little bit of sweet romance, and this is now going to be a series. There's currently 2 books out, but the 3rd book is coming out next year. I feel like this is the book that I pushed most last year for more people to try and read. I still feel like I maybe loved it more than many others have, but it was just such like a perfect read for me in terms of like being wholesome, being pretty sad and dealing with some hard topics, but also being funny and light and like all wrapped up really nicely. So this is definitely one that I will keep recommending. Another World War II historical fiction is City of Thieves by David Benioff. This is set in the city of Leningrad, now known as St. Petersburg, and it follows 2 young boys on a mission to find some eggs in the middle of winter in a city ravaged by the war and when people are starving. This is a slim little novel. It is a very fast read. It is full of some hard content and language and crude boy humor, so this is not for everyone, but I loved it, connected with it. I thought it was an excellent read, a fast read, a funny read, and just also a really fun story of friendship as well. So this book has become my ultimate short book recommendation. I think easily a book that you can read in one sitting, in one day, that kind of thing. Next up, I have another author spotlight and another World War II book, but I could not make this video without mentioning Ruta Sepetys, and my favorite of hers is Salt to the Sea. A lot of other people's favorite is Between Shades of Grey, and I think it just depends on which one you read first from her. Both of these were excellent. I gave both of these 5 stars. I just more connected with Salt to the Sea because it felt like a more unique read to me about 4 different people and their perspectives on the Wilhelm Gustave, which is an ocean liner that a lot of refugees were climbing into, fleeing from the Russian army surrounding Germany. And this book is the closest that I've read to a similar story like Titanic, where there is an ocean liner and there's a sinking of a ship and there's tragedy, but I also feel like I learned a perspective from World War II that I wasn't familiar with before, and so this one stood out to me a lot. But I will say Ruta Sepetys is another author that I absolutely love. All 3 of these I gave 5 stars, including her newest one, which is I Must Betray You. I loved all 3 of these reads, and very similar to Amy Harmon, whatever book Ruta Sepetys comes out with next, I'm gonna have my eye on. I'm gonna want to read it because she does an incredible job of focusing on a moment of history that a lot of people aren't aware of that happened before, and she does incredible research with her books. I've read all of her books and I really enjoyed all of them. These are just some of the standouts for me though. Next up, I'll mention The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meisner. I don't have my copy here with me because I'm actually lending it to a friend and she really enjoyed it, but this was my first exposure to Susan Meisner. This is set in 1905 in San Francisco when the big earthquake happened and ravaged the city, and it follows a young woman who decided to become a mail order bride and married a man that she did not know and helps raise his child. And at first everything seems to be going well, but then a mystery unveils, and it read a lot like a mystery survival story, and it was also just very jam-packed, page-turning, and I really loved my experience with it. Since reading that book, I've now also read another one of her books, and it wasn't a favorite of mine. It was Secrets of a Charmed Life. I really had high expectations because so many people loved it, and I thought it was just okay. But I will mention a book of hers that I think has the potential to become a favorite is As Bright as Heaven. This is one I've been meaning to get to, and hopefully I'll get it read soon. But so many people love this one as well, and is probably their favorite Susan Meisner book, so I think this one has the potential to become a favorite out of her very extensive backlist. And then my last favorite book that I'm very certain of is a favorite in my top 6 is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I know that this series is not for everyone. I completely understand that, because it is also filled with a lot of brutality and sexual content and violence and all kinds of stuff that is too much for people, which is completely fair. But I just think that Diana Gabaldon wrote the characters of Claire and Jamie so brilliantly, and I just couldn't help but root for them. I care about them so much. I love the way she writes. I'm still making my way through this 10-book series. The next one I need to read is book 6, and they're all very long, but I'm still in it and I still care. But none of the other books in the series has even come close to what reading this first book was like. Another reason why I love it so much is that it is set in Scotland, and it also uncovered this historical time period that I just really wasn't familiar with, and this part of history that I didn't learn about in school. So I love just being in it. So next up, I'm going to mention 4 books that when I was thinking of this top 10 list made its way into my top 10, but I haven't read them for years that I don't know if they hold up. And so I intend to reread these hopefully in 2023 to really determine whether they do hold up. The first one I'll mention is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is one of those books that I feel like for the most part people absolutely loved, and there is a group of people that really didn't like it. I definitely fell into the camp of absolutely loving this book. I devoured it. I sobbed like a baby. I thought it was the most amazing experience. But I haven't read it since 2016, and I honestly could not tell you anything about it. I have zero recollection of what the story is about. When people talk about it, I don't know. I know it has to do with sisters during the war, but I don't know any details. So I feel like in rereading this, it is gonna be like a new book for me. And so in my reread, I think it will determine whether this holds up as a favorite or not, because I will be coming at it with almost new eyes since I don't remember anything. It's been a goal of mine to reread this for a while, but I really think I can do that in 2023. I also don't know what happened to the movie. I know the movie's supposed to be coming out, keeps getting pushed out, but even so, I want to reread before I watch the movie. That's a project of mine. I will say this is a favorite based on my emotions that I recall feeling when reading it, so my reread will tell. Another book that I really need to reread, but I think will hold up, is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. This was a book that I think I read somewhere between 2008 and 2010, and I remember loving it. I don't have the book anymore. Before I started BookTube, I actually gave away all of the books that I had, which makes me really sad now, because if only I knew that I was gonna get so much more into reading and would want to reread some favorites, I would have kept it around. I need to get my hands on a copy of The Book Thief, and I want to reread it and see if it holds up. I've seen some people read it now and they still really love it, so I think I'll still really love it. It is a World War II, I believe, like YA classic at this point, and it has to do with book burning, and I think the main perspective is death, which is a unique perspective. So it's in my top 10 favorites list, but with a little asterisk because I need to reread it. Another World War II children's classic that I need to reread because it is the book that started it all for me, and that is Number the Stars by Lewis Lowry. This book, I think, is the first historical fiction book that I read. I remember absolutely loving it. I think we did a school project on it. I remember being in 4th grade when reading this, and I need to reread it because I haven't read it since being in elementary school. And so again, it's in this top 10 favorites list because of its impact, but I really would love to reread it just to see how it fares now with my more critical, I guess, view of reading. And then finally, another book that I think needs a reread in order for me to determine whether it is a favorite is A Voice in the Wind by Francine Rivers, and this is the first book in a trilogy. This is a biblical fiction set about 30 years after Jesus's death. It follows a young woman who is a Jewish slave, and she is a slave for a Roman family. There is some romance in the series, but it's much more than that. And I know that the series is not a favorite. I think I gave the second book 4 stars and the last book 2 stars, but I remember this one being very impactful, but I haven't read it since 2017, I think, so I don't know how it holds up. I will say I did reread Francine Rivers this year, Redeeming Love. I did consider this an absolutely favorite book of mine, and in rereading it, it did hold up, but I think it dropped off the absolute favorites list because I do have some problems with this book. I made a whole video about reading this book and then watching the movie. So I wouldn't consider this historical fiction in my top 10. And this one I need to reread to see if it holds up. And I feel like it still will be a good book, but I will hesitate to think that it's an absolute favorite and deserves its way in my top 10. Either way, I need to try it again to see. So that is my top 10 with a couple books that I already mentioned have 5-star potential. And I just want to mention a couple more that I think could be favorites. And these next two I'll mention, you've seen me mention before. I keep getting recommendations for me to read them because they will be favorites. I even made a whole video where I tried the first chapter of a bunch of historical fiction, and these two made their way to the top, but I just haven't got around to reading them yet. The first one is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I think I'm gonna love it. Stop shouting at me to read it. I'm gonna read it. I just don't know when, but I think this has 5-star potential, and maybe even this author becomes a favorite. We'll see. I have a couple of his books on my shelves to read. This is a book that so many people love, and I think I will as well. And then also Beneath the Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. I also really enjoy the first chapter of this, and I think I'm gonna love the rest of the book. I just wanted to throw those in there because we were talking about some favorite reads and some potential favorite reads in this video. All that to say, I do realize most of these reads are World War II. Most of them, if not all, have main white characters, and that is definitely on me. I just have not read enough diverse historical fiction. That will also be maybe like a micro goal next year, is just to read different stories from different main characters set in different countries than just the US or Europe or during the war. And I know I've already asked in a few videos, but I'm going to ask again. Let me know if you have any recommendations for me for historical fiction reads that are your favorites that you think I would enjoy as well, because I really just want to read some standout historical fiction and other genre as well, but historical fiction specifically, since that's what we're talking about in this video. I would love any recommendations. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye!